Hello, loves. So today I wanted to have a chat and channel session with you about the difference between being woke and being someone who is involved in awakening. Because to me, and in my experience, there is a stark difference between those two. And as we continue to move, especially through the year in which this is being recorded, which is a 7-year in numerology, which is geared towards spirituality and awakening, and as we are in this period of the Kali Yuga for the next few decades at least, when a lot of dark night of the soul and awakening things are going to continue to happen for the collectives, I believe that this message is going to be especially important. So please bookmark it and come back to it whenever time is calling you to do so, as this is a timeless message. Before we jump into the difference between woke and awakening, let me introduce myself for those of you who are new. My name is Danielle, #damsel at 𝑓𝑑𝑠𝑛�lightened edits of damseldesigns.com. I am a spiritual empowerment and consciousness coach, as well as energy healer, psychic medium, writer, energy artist, and so much more. I know that is a lot of titles, but we are multi-dimensional and multi-talented souls here. And this is Chat and Channel Session, where my guides, and in some cases some of you, present me with a topic and we have a stream of consciousness channeling about it. I encourage you, as long as you are not driving that is, to take part in the chat portion of Chat and Channel and leave a comment, a review, or my preferred method of being involved, which is getting out a journal or the notes app on your phone or favorite device and doing some stream of consciousness writing along with me, as these transmissions and channeling sessions also have the ability to spark intuition for you and your experience with guides of your own. And I love hearing from you guys back, whether it's in comments or personal messages, about the insights that you are able to receive by listening. I will say, for this particular channeling, because it can be a sort of hot button issue and provide some triggers, I would appreciate if before you took part in any commenting portion of this particular chat and channel, if you took some time to listen to it in depth before you responded to any triggers that you may have and leave a comment. Because of the fact that we're going to be probably addressing some political things here somewhat, I would really appreciate you hearing out the full channeling before providing your comments. So with all that being said, let's get started. So as someone who has been on this awakening journey since birth because of my gifts and interests, and also as someone professionally who has guided clients all around the world through different aspects of this journey, I personally prefer to use the term awakening, as in my experience, it is something that we continue to do. Even when you get to certain levels of consciousness, as we are alive, there are always continual layers and levels of consciousness in my experience. And we go through the awakening process several times throughout a lifetime, in my view, and again, in my experience. Now, this is where we can also get the phenomenon of spiritual people going through several dark nights of the soul, which often precede a quantum leap or a second or third or fourth or however many awakening experience as we grow to other levels, depending on how attached we've become to the level of awakening before. And I'm really not sure where this term woke came from, or even awakened has come from, because past tense is never something that I see as appropriate as someone on this journey. If you are bold enough to use a past tense in terms of your awakening and say that you are woke or fully awakened, I think that you are deceiving yourself and perhaps others, because if you were, as you say, fully awakened, in my view, there would be no purpose to you continuing to be alive. You would be like one of the stories that we have of the ascended masters who leave this reality, leave this life journey, but tend to hang close to the consciousness paradigms of reality in order to help out those still within it. An example of this would be the ascended master Kuan Yin, who did awaken or ascend out of this reality, but sticks close by to help her children and those who call upon her. Christ could also be considered one of these. It really depends on your personal beliefs and your understandings or willingness to believe in and tap into the ascended masters aspect of spirituality. I do know and am aware that there are people who are living who refer to themselves as ascended masters, and although I work with these types of consciousness quite often and for quite a number of years and know what it is like to step into the ability to embody with them, I personally do not feel relevant to call myself that or in resonance with others who call themselves ascended masters here on earth. I think that there is some element of deception there because I think a large part of that tends to do with ego or with what a lot of people refer to as false light. In my experience, the people who are working with these true enlightened energies are also tapped into the energy of unconditional love and allowance for everybody's belief systems and experience and respect of everyone's soul sovereignty. So that is my little TED talk there on false light to a degree and to the teachers who refer to or put themselves on that tier or capacity. Now, in regards to wokeness or being woke or awakened, this has taken a political spin in many aspects and in my view has been taken over by these beings or the powers that were who like to try to use people informing themselves and becoming enlightened or awakening again to their advantage because of the stranglehold that religion has had over people's consciousness, knowledge, and enlightenment for so many thousands of years. The powers that were, as I like to refer to them, try to now go to this next level of seeing spirituality and awakening culture as a new form of religion in itself and something that they can try to take over again in order to steer people back in their direction rather in the direction of ascension or true awakening. And so this is where we get the phenomena of politicians or quote unquote religious leaders trying to use things about mindfulness, possibly mental health, and spirituality in order to identify themselves and bring more people back to their side, as it were. Now, wokeness has become this thing of its own where it is politically correct or politically incorrect to call certain things out or to try to implement, or force certain behaviors in the name of respect and understanding or even human rights. Now, many spiritual people do have a natural inclination to fight for and want human rights for their fellow humans. However, the degree that it gets taken to and incensed with wokeness can actually be harmful in my point of view. Now, I was discussing this with some people recently in terms of the direction and the slant that we've seen, not necessarily the news media take, because that's quite obvious, but the slant that we've seen even fiction media and things like television shows and movies take. And while the media and Hollywood always have elements of predictive programming within them, in my experience, recently, in the past few years, especially since the show And Just Like That, and more recently, I've noticed it in the reboot of the L Word, Generation Q. Feel free to name in the comments any shows or movies that you may have seen this in. But in newer shows that are trying to be woke, are trying to be hip, especially even in these shows that are reboots and are trying to redo or perhaps heal grievances that they've done against communities in their earlier incarnations. I've seen this slant to new writers, new showrunners taking the lead, taking over in the name of wokeness and trying to tick boxes of inclusivity and diversity. And in my opinion, when you do that in the name of wokeness, you are not being spiritual, you are not being inclusive, you are not even being diverse, because what you are doing when you do something like that, when you tell stories, fill a job, a position, or a box, by simply trying to be the first to be a representation of someone or something, or to try to heal an old wound before you understand it and then provide representation on top of that, you are doing a disservice to the community that you claim to be trying to include. I personally don't see representation or diversity for representation or diversity's sake as something that is kind, that is awakening, that is spiritual, or that is part of inclusivity or human rights. Because although someone may get in the room, get in the role, get in the door, if you are including them or trying to force them into this box to say that you checked a box and included a race, included a gender identity, or included a disability, then you are doing a disservice to that person, to the character, or the story that you are trying to portray. Now, while we are talking this in terms of fiction, because I think it will provoke less for people than trying to bring real life examples into the mix, I want to be clear here in saying, I do believe everybody deserves to be in the room. I believe things have to be done to level the playing field and give everyone a fair shot, and that there have been too many doors that have been closed to certain groups for centuries. However, the way that we are currently, or the way that I currently see us going about it, I believe is more harmful. I think we are doing disservice to these people. As someone who is in several of those communities who are trying to be represented more, the way that I see us being represented, I personally don't like. I think it's making stories and heart and integrity fall by the wayside just to say that somebody is in the room, in the story, in the conversation, or in the door. I think conversations need to be had. I think stories and characters should be built for inspiration's sake, and then it gets to be in addendum their race or their gender or their able-bodiedness. It gets to be a part of them. It does not get to be the reason that they are included. Because as someone who has been in several marginalized communities, I can tell you that it does not feel good just to be included for included's sake. And it especially does not feel good to try to then make yourself fit a role rather than be invited in for the person you are and allow for amenities to be changed for other facets of yourself, such as your gender or your able-bodiedness or your sexuality or what have you. I prefer to see us move in those directions, and I prefer to see us move in the directions where we can have the uncomfortable conversations. I do very much believe in unconscious bias. I do very much believe in healing that. That's something that's been so important to me to heal in myself, in my family line, in my communities. And I love the ways that we are able to stand for and with one another now in terms of injustice. However, the ways that I see us fighting for rights or fighting with each other based on wokeness are bringing in more divisiveness than actual inclusivity. And I think more of us need to be able to and willing to take a step back before jumping on ourselves, others, even the media, government, or culture, and do the self-work first to understand unconscious biases that we may have, understand triggers that we may have, and then be willing to go the extra mile in terms of what are our motivations. Why do we want to fight for something? Why do we want and how do we want people to be respected and included? Because I can almost promise you, obviously in a world where all things are potential, but I can almost promise you that if we continue to include people and fight for people and give people rights simply because of one facet of themselves, such as their sexuality, such as their race, such as their gender, we're forming not only more divisiveness between other people and other points of view, but more divisiveness between the soul, because we are encouraging the fractalization of it rather than the uniformity and the wholeness and the healing of it. We are failing to recognize the whole person, the whole group, the whole community based on all the other things they are, if we are so limiting it just to these small identifiers in the name of wokeness. In my opinion, and in my experience, and in the guise of this channeling and what my guides have shown me in terms of how much harm some of this wokeness has done, how many more fights some of this wokeness has caused, how much more misunderstanding rather than the healing and community coming together that is the initial intention or motivation for a lot of people. But because people tend to forget or blur the lines of their initial motivation or intention if they fail to go those extra steps in doing their own healing and then in also encouraging group or community healing along with whatever justice or rights work they are fighting for or that they are ranting about or raving about. All of this can get blurred, and then we can end up with these products that very much are mirroring what we're seeing in terms of the fictional stories that I was talking about earlier, and how they ultimately fail, how they ultimately let so many people down or frustrate so many more people, rather than coming to that heart-based understanding that I know so many of us in the spiritual and empathic communities especially are looking for. I often talk about as an empath, and in working with empaths, especially those who identify in any form also as an activist, there is a teaching in Buddhism. Now, 𝑇�𓋹�㓴, the Buddhist nun, speaks about this a great deal. This is a teaching that my guides taught me and then showed me her work in validation of that, which is the fact that whenever we are fighting something or someone or a group or for a right, we have to be willing to examine the fact that if we look at something like a protest, if we were to look at television footage of something like a protest, people fighting for their rights, whether it's for a law, reproductive rights, sexuality rights, gender, race rights, whatever it is, if we were to watch television coverage of that and mute it, 𝑇�𓋹�㓴 talks about how her student was watching a protest on TV and it was muted, and both sides looked the same to her. And it didn't matter what the sign said. They were looking at the faces of the people that were just enraged and incensed and fighting each other with fear and rage, rather than trying to come at it with true awakening ability of understanding and not necessarily love, although we hope love will be a motivator. But I know it's hard to feel love in those type of moments. But if we can come at it with understanding and higher perspective and realize if we are fighting for something, do we necessarily want to match energies with the opposing side that we feel is being oppressive? Or do we want to have the ability to raise up in consciousness and heart-based perspective to overcome it? Because only in my view, when we continuously take more steps in the fields of overcoming and higher perspective, rather than simply matching enraged energies is when we can actually see real change happen. Until then, both sides tend to be being used for that rage and fear energy that they are producing by the powers that be, the powers that were, whatever you'd like to call them, to confuse the issue rather than actually ever bring culmination or resolve to that issue. It's why we see so many of these issues cycle back around again, because the universe, in my view, is giving us continual chances to bring resolve and complete healing and more understanding, because I don't know that we could ever have complete understanding, but more understanding to these things. A lot of these things tend to be karmic, and we want to bring healing and resolve to them so that we stop cycling around in the same karma and can step into more of that dharma-ness. I see a lot of people being called racist and bigot because they are opposed to certain aspects of the new woke culture, even though some of them are in these communities. Some of them do have families in these communities, mean and have never done any harm to these communities. However, they just simply have a different perspective in how certain things should be addressed. And I feel like in order to move forward, we have to make room for more conversation and realize that conversation is not necessarily law or canon or Bible or whatever you would like to say. We need to realize that having the conversation does not mean that actions are necessarily going to be done to follow it. However, too many times we jump to correlating conversation with action rather than having open form conversations, having roundtables, having think tanks, and making space for everyone's thoughts and feelings so that when we go to do things that are action or do become or have the potential to become law or rules or school rules or what have you, we're doing so from an informed and actually inclusive space. And we can be more on what we believe the right side of history without necessarily needing to be divisive or to try to hold ownership or rulership over other people. So that is my perspective in how I believe wokeness is doing more harm than good, and the differences between woke and awakening in my perspective. As I said, I believe awakening to be a continual process of growing and expanding your consciousness, your belief systems, your treatment of yourself, the world, and others. And I don't personally believe anyone is within reasonability to define that in terms of past tense. Although I respect everyone's experience and beliefs and rights to do that if they so choose, it is not an experience that I agree with or recommend to my clients or my students or my friends. And if you have ever maybe misclassed yourself as that because these terms are popular now, I hope that this has helped you possibly rethink that and thought of new classifications or labels for yourself. And remember too that labels just help us kind of categorize things. It's sort of the algorithm of human experience, and they help us identify certain things or go in certain directions. But you don't have to use any label or title in order to be valid and respected in your soul sovereign experience. I hope that as we move more into the place where we're trying to hold lawmakers and rule makers accountable to things that spirituality and awakening are bringing up, we can drop some of this false culture or societal pressure of wokeness and step more into the middle ground where we can do things just because they feel right and respectful and not solely built on the shaky and unsolid foundations of trying to be diverse or inclusive in order to shut people up, because that's what I see a lot of in laws, in society, in television, like we were speaking about, in so many fields and areas. And I think even if at first it feels good to see representation, because representation does matter. It helps us understand and get ideas in terms of what we can create for ourselves and others. But if it's built on these foundations of just doing it maybe to shut people up or to hold something up with a gold star and say, look, we did it, we included people, we're respecting people, that's a foundation that's eventually, in my experience, going to be called back with a tower moment, as we say in tarot, to be redone. It's going to be built on karma, and karma eventually wants to be rebalanced, transmuted, or healed. And I would like to see us come to the place where more of this can be done on solid foundations from the jump, in actual and full respect from the jump, rather than in pressurized wokeness, which in my view is built on fear. So I hope that some of this has resonated with you and made you think. If you would like to share it, I would love for you to share this with others that may find it helpful. I would also like to say, please don't feel the need to have conversations with this about people that you don't think will be able to have respectful conversation with you. Because if we're just doing that match energy thing and throw perspectives back and forth at one another without being able to respect one another's perspectives, we're doing more of that 𝑓𝑘𝓳�� thing rather than the overcoming thing. And in that case, those people may not be the ones to share this with. But I do appreciate anyone that you feel would be resonant with it, that you would like to share it with. It really helps it spread through the algorithm and help more people. And I would love to see and hear the things that you're able to create in your life, in your family lines, in your friend group, in your inspirations for your creations or for humanity, where we can build more on solid foundations of awakening and respect and soul sovereignty rather than on wokeness. So if you have any respectful ideas that you would like to share in the comments or reviews, I would love to hear them. If you would like to work with me personally in terms of perhaps healing your perspectives, your patterns, ancestral karmas or traumas or abuses that you may have experienced on your soul, you can use the link in my description or visit my website, Damsel Designs, DAMCL designs.com. There is a form there for consciousness coaching and energy healing so that you can contact me and we can jump on a conversation and see if we're a good fit to deep dive and heal and rise with you in such in-depth and awakening inspired works. I would love to work with more of you in that capacity and help you to feel more conscious, more inspired, more empowered, and less held back by any of these views or any of the things from your own past that you may see as limiting beliefs. If you would like, you can also find quantum and Akashic Records single sessions and other types of spiritual offerings on my website. The difference between single session and energy healing or coaching is that in a single session, we can access you a wide range of information and give you recommendation and modality tools, but you would implement those tools going forward if you chose single session on your own. Whereas in coaching and energy healing, I'm with you every step of the way. We go quite in depth in quantum, 𝑓𝑘𝓳��, and shamanic energy healing, and with so many different tools to help you truly heal and integrate that energy in a supportive and advancing container. So you can check out the differences between those things and offerings on my website, and you can always start with a single session and then expand into energy healing or coaching if you would like. On my website, you'll also find energy art, enlightened merch, and some other ways that I use my gifts and offerings. And I would love for you to become a member of my communities on any platform that you are listening to this on, or particularly on my YouTube or Instagram, where you can find me most days, so that we can get to know each other better. I can see more of the ways that you use your gifts and offerings in the world. Be sure to like this if you liked it. it, and I hope that you will become a follower or a subscriber and come back around for future chat and channel sessions. You can also currently find the back catalog of timeless material of chat and channel sessions in a YouTube playlist on my YouTube channel at 𝑓𝑑𝑠_Enlightened_Edits. All of these things, by the way, are linked in the description. There is also a way there to donate and support the channel if you would like to. I hope to see you next time. Be blessed. Keep awakening, keep trusting yourself and whatever higher powers you believe in. I trust you and the ways that you are moving through the world, and I'm thankful for all the ways that you do that in full respect and soul sovereignty for yourself and others. I hope that this has encouraged you to believe in yourself and in our world a little more. With love, light, and light codes, love Danielle, #damsel at 𝑓𝑑𝑠_Enlightened_Edits of damseldesigns.com. See you next time.